Shabbat Shalom and Chag Sameach, everybody. I am delighted to be and really honored to be introducing Nechama Namal and Anat Hoffman this morning from Women of the Wall. And I just wanted to share one brief personal experience that in July of 2010, I was in Jerusalem doing a summer program at Pardes Liberal Yeshiva. And I had never had an opportunity to pray with Women of the Wall during their regular Rosh Chodesh minyan, because as you all and Rebecca know, it was too early for me to get up and get to the kotel in time to daven with them. But this time I was determined to do so, and it was Rosh Chodesh Av. And as we prayed to welcome the month that contained the commemoration of the destruction of the temple because of sinat chinam, senseless hatred, there were men on the other side of the mechitza shouting at us between their own prayers. And some of them were actually shouting about sinat chinam, which I just thought was senseless hatred, which I just thought was terribly ironic. And we were surrounded by police, which were ostensibly for our own protection, but most likely to make sure that we didn't get too loud or too brazen in our donning of religious garb like talit and tefillin. We were not allowed to read Torah at the Western Wall, or I think given some of the court cases we were allowed, but it was not safe to do so. Wait 1 second. But it was not safe to do so. So as Anat began to carry the scroll to our designated and permitted space, a trail of women were singing softly behind her, and Anat was actually arrested carrying the Torah scroll. And the Torah scroll, which belonged to Women of the Wall, which was donated to Women of the Wall, was confiscated. And some people might question why we take up this issue as Reform Jews in America when we have so many battles to fight. And from seeing the way that Anat was treated and how all of us were treated in that moment, I saw that how women and religious minorities and any kind of minority are treated in a public space reflects attitudes towards women and religious minorities throughout Israel and throughout the Jewish community. And these must be addressed if we want to pursue equality and justice for all in other kinds of spaces. And because of that, I so admire the work that Anat has done, both with Women of the Wall and with the Israel Religious Action Center, both of which fight for justice and civil liberties for women and for religious minorities and for other kinds of minorities in the state of Israel. And I will not take up any more of her time and let her speak to you. Welcome, Anat Hoffman. Brucha haba.
So shalom, hi everybody, Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom. It's wonderful to see you all, particularly the men among you. It's wonderful that you're staying to hear about Women of the Wall. We're going to spend an hour together. I'll try to make some outrageous statements for half an hour, and then I would love to hear you. Am I right, Leah? Is that how we're going to run it?
I don't think we were going to go for a whole hour, but we're definitely open to it.
So we could do it less, but tell me how long we have, and half of it goes to questions.
Okay, so usually we have about 20 to 25 minutes of speaking, and then maybe 15 minutes for questions.
Okay.
So you want to do like 20 to 20.
You heard it right here. So 2020. So 20 minutes, I will tell you the amazing story of Women of the Wall. It really is, it has its comic aspects. And I think we should appreciate them because it's so ridiculous. Just think about it. It's a wall, and we are denied the right to pray at the wall, which is so crazy, at the Jewish state. The Jewish state was supposed to be, the supermarket of Jewish experiences. The club meant for the Jewish soul. That's why Leah came to Pardes, to enjoy the variety and the expanding universe of Judaism. And she was exposed to the phenomenal world of Israel, which is really diverse and amazing. But Jewishly, Israel's quite bankrupt because of the ultra-Orthodox monopoly and because only one zealot religious stream was given the keys to all religious things in Israel. Yes. I just want to say something, correct you, Rabbi, on one thing and say something personal. The thing I want to correct you about is that You said that the Torah scroll was donated and it's ours. It belongs to Women of the Wall. We're very careful not to accept it as a gift. It is on a loan. It really belongs to Temple B'nai Israel in Sacramento. And the reason is that if it gets confiscated, we are always ready to sue the government of Israel in a petition called B'nai Israel versus the state of Israel, because this belongs to B'nai Israel. This is not the Torah of Women of the Wall. It belongs to B'nai Israel in Sacramento. And we were very careful. Even though they wanted to give it as a gift, we said, no, 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 it's a loan. It belongs to you. And we're going to fight like hell to get it back if it is confiscated. The personal thing I wanted to say is that my father, Charles, made Aliyah to Israel in 1947 from a place called Westchester, Pennsylvania. I don't know where Westchester is, and I don't know how close you are to Westchester.
Very close to here. It's about 20 minutes from where I grew up, which is about 40 minutes.
Okay, so I want to ask the oldest people listening, do you remember a Shmatis store, a store for ladies' clothing in Westchester called Joel's? Because if you do, Joel is my grandfather, and I also am the proud mother of Joel, my youngest son. So somewhere in Pennsylvania, I have a little bit of a root. My father was a kid when he made Aliyah, and wasn't Israel then, it was Palestine, but there's a little bit of Pennsylvania in me.
That's also where the newest URJ camp is, so we're going to have you there this summer.
In Westchester?
Yeah, right next to Westchester, is where the Creative Arts Camp is. Yes, so I'm gonna.
My dad is 93 and still alive, lives about 500 meters away from here, and still dreams about, sometimes he dreams about Westchester. So let me explain the thing about Women of the Wall. Women of the Wall was not born in Israel and did not evolve naturally with Israeli women. And the reason is it's bred out of us Israelis from a very young age to really think that we are 100% equal to men. It has there's so many messages, some subliminal and many overt, that a young Israeli girl from a very early age learns that her worth is not as important and valuable as that of her brother, her cousin, or uncle, or whatever. Boys are worth more. When I was born, my parents received a telegram. It was a decorated telegram from the Israeli post office. They received 3 such, and it said, for boys, it had Mazal Tov Leuledet Ben, Mazel Tov for the birth of your son. But for girls, it said, girls first, good sign for boys later. You're with me? Girls first, Bat Tchila Siman Yafeh Lebanim. It's from the Talmud. And throughout my life, as a young Israeli, born in Jerusalem, I was always told that my brother Roni carries the family jewels, and that I am, I'm his sister. But Roni, it really is. And when it was bar mitzvah time, Ronnie had a huge bar mitzvah, seriously big, and he got all these books, and he got a fountain pen, and he got a big party, and he learned to read from the Torah, and he went to shul, and he had there was a big to-do, and it was my time for a bat mitzvah. I was told that there is no such thing for girls. And in a recent study, we found that 95% of Israeli girls do not have a bat mitzvah, but a bat mitzvush. Bat mitzvush is a big party. If right now, no, not right now, because today is Chag and Shabbat, but if tomorrow you and I call any hall, hall in Jerusalem, and we say that we want to do a bar mitzvah, we will have to pay something between $50 and $60 a plate for this. This is an important, big occasion. But if we say we want to do a bat mitzvah, $10, $15, and we're done. and they won't give you the big haul. If you go to any store and you say, I have to go to a bar mitzvah, what gift are you suggesting? 500 shekel is a bar mitzvah gift. I want to go for a bat mitzvah. Do you have a gift for that? Little soaps and little smelly things. You could get out with 100 shekel easy. So I'm just giving you tiny examples. There are so many ways that the Israeli society is blaring into girls' ears that they're worthless. And if they didn't get the point by the time they're in the army, we see a very dramatic decline in the feelings of self-worth of girls, while we see exactly the opposite with boys. The army is an excellent place for young boys to start feeling like men. And girls are quite objectified in the army, and they come out with in fact, the lowest part of their self-esteem in their lifetime is coming in out of the army. So in this kind of society, it didn't grow the idea that girls and women can pray together at the wall, read from the Torah, and celebrate Rosh Chodesh. It did not grow in Israel because it was bred out of us, but it grew in New York. It was a group of women from abroad, from New York, from Canada. They came to Israel to a conference on the empowerment of Jewish women, and it was their idea to bring the Torah to the wall. This is important because you need to realize that this struggle, which is considered one of the important struggles in recent history in religion and state in Israel, is a contribution from women from abroad. And that's wonderful. It's a contribution to Israel. You know, just like my dad came from Westchester, and whatever he did in Israel and throughout his life was his contribution, this idea made Aliyah. Anyway, these women came to Israel. They were attacked at the wall, but when they left Israel, we, the Israelis who joined them, we decided to continue this and continue to go to the wall. The violence against us was amazing, really quite considerable. I took women to the emergency room with serious injuries, and for 32 years, Women of the Wall have been fighting for 4 strategic goals. The first is to wear a talit. Your rabbi, your cantor are wearing talitot right now. It is so natural that you don't even think about it. But in Israel, wearing a talit for a woman was a criminal act. The second is to pray out loud. We heard women praying out loud right now. It was a criminal act. If it wasn't for Women of the Wall, this would still be a criminal act. Putting on phylacteries. It is not your minhag right now, but for Women of the Wall, there are women who do put on phylacteries, tefillin, and until recently, it was a criminal act. And finally, reading Torah. Reading Torah is not allowed for women in Israel at the wall. I need to repeat that because it's so counterintuitive. It makes absolutely no sense. So these are the 4 strategic goals. In 32 years, we were able to achieve 3 out of these 4 goals. It is now legal for a woman to wear a talit. It is legal for a woman to put on phylacteries. It is legal for a woman to pray out loud and dance and say Kaddish and light a menorah. We have made all this now legal. This struggle really changed the Jewish world as we know it. The one thing that is still not allowed is we're not allowed to read Torah. What you did so naturally just now, we can't do. What do you think about separating women from Torah? Let me remind you that the religion of a child in our religion is determined first and foremost by the religion of his mother. How can the religion like that separate women from the holiest text of the Jewish people? So we've been fighting for Torah now, and we have a feisty little book that we take to the wall. We hide it in places that I can't disclose to you. And out of 40 attempts, we were able to get the Torah into the wall area 6 times. That's not a very good batting average. But the fact that we need to sit, we are adult women and we're sitting there contemplating how can we sneak the Torah to the women's section of the wall so that a bat mitzvah girl can read her Torah portion. This is so insane. I can't, the Jewish way is to laugh at it. It just makes the fact that a Jewish policeman confiscates a Torah scroll from a woman, the fact that they're actually checking us when we arrive at the wall, there's a body search. Some of us are asked to take off their clothing because police are looking for a Torah scroll, not a bomb, not a hand grenade, a Torah scroll. Today on Simchat Torah, I can tell you that a Torah is like a bomb when it comes to the security at the Western Wall. I would agree with the police. The Torah has a potential to explode your world, but I absolutely disagree that this is something that women cannot read from. So I'd love to hear your comments or questions, really. Having a dialogue with you is very important to me. And Rabbi, can you just let people ask questions?
Yes, I will moderate.
Okay.
And so you have 2 choices. You can unmute yourself because we're pretty small, so I think you can all do proper Zoom etiquette. If you can't get a word in edgewise, which sometimes happens, you can type a question in the chat and I'll ask it.
Joel Edelstein here. I don't know what to say. I imagine that you are giving a sermon to the choir. So you're not going to get an argument here. That's what I have to say.
First, I think that the choir also needs some sermoning. The choir are people who are committed to the synagogue and they show up as volunteers and they should be addressed. And this is me talking to you, but I'd like to say that many times I speak to North American Jews and they say to me, what right, people like you, Joel, will say, what right do I have to interfere? This is another country. This is an internal affair that they're having. I'm not paying taxes there. I don't send my children to the army there. What right do I have to express an opinion about Israel's policy concerning the wall? And I would like to answer that. Oh, you have an answer?
I have an answer. I have an answer to that.
Go ahead.
I send lots of money to Israel. Israel puts itself out as the homeland of all Jews. So it's my homeland too. And I am not comfortable with what's going on in Israel, whether it has to do with other Jewish people or other people entirely. It makes me embarrassed, just like my president embarrasses me in the world. And
yes.
And Netanyahu embarrasses me in the world. It makes me sick.
Let me make things harder for you, Joel. All contributions from North America to Israel, all the wonderful money that is given to Magen David Adom, to Friends of IDF, to Tel Aviv University, whatever you support in Israel, adds up to less than 2% of Israel's budget. So an Israeli can tell you, you know what, mister? Take your 2% and don't tell us what to do. I don't think that the reason you have a say in what's happening in Israel is your money. I think the reason you have a say is because it's a joint project. It's the biggest Jewish project of our lifetime. We are part of the historical attempt for Jews to have a sovereign state somewhere on this planet. We will not be given another chance. And what are the values of the Jewish state? Joel, you have a seat at the table. No one can tell you don't have a seat at the table, whether you contributed or not. This is our project together. And whether chauvinism, racism, intolerance are Israeli values or equality, tolerance, or pluralism, it's not just your right to sit at that table, it's your duty to sit at this table. So some of you are not big contributors to Israel. Some of you don't contribute at all. It doesn't matter. You have a place at the table and you must be heard on what are the values of the Jewish state. And if we have given the keys to the holiest site of the Jewish people, to one minority zealot group who's becoming more and more zealot every day, it is your duty to say, we must take the keys back. That's why you're my soul brother, Joel. And the fact that you're uncomfortable is, as far as I'm concerned, an act of faith and a boost of encouragement. Because when Netanyahu stood last year in front of AIPAC and announced that he found a solution at the wall, that he signed an agreement with the women of the wall and the Reform Conservative movements, and then reneged on this, sadly, the cheering crowd of 20,000 participants at AIPAC he did not have to face any consequences of betraying this agreement. You know about the agreement. We reached an agreement with, yeah, I was disappointed that there were no ramifications about this. I was hoping the North American Jews will jump out of their skin and say that agreement is important and that we want to see a change in policy at the wall. And
I've actually followed a lot of our agreements, but because of all the turmoil we've had in our own country, I might have missed the terms of the last one, and I think I might not be alone in that. What were the terms of the agreement, and what did he go back on?
Oh, so the agreement, the agreement took 3 years to reach. Let me maybe backtrack for a minute. When there were arrests of women of the wall, meaning we were in cells in the jail because we wore a talit, prayed out loud, read Torah. I was a few times in jail, once because I enticed young women to have a bat mitzvah. Man, I can't think of a better reason to go to jail. You know what, to get to jail for wearing a talit, I had to explain to my cellmates, why am I there? One of them was a Russian lady, that was accused of solicitation for prostitution. And she spoke no Hebrew and I speak no Russian. And I had to explain to her that I pray in a place you're not allowed to pray. And with this thing that you're, very hard to explain to a Russian from Siberia, why we're spending time in the same cell. Another woman in my cell was a car thief. She told me that she specializes in German cars. I asked her, what did you steal tonight? And she said, a Volvo. I was afraid of her, but I'm not afraid of you. So I will tell you, Volvo is not German. I was afraid to mention this. Anyway, when these arrests occurred, North American Jews jumped out of their skin, got very upset, to the point that Yaakov Amidro, who is an assistant to Netanyahu on strategic affairs, wrote a paper called Women of the Wall as a Strategic Threat to Israeli Interests in North America. That report made Netanyahu reach out to Mr. Natan Sharansky, the head of the Jewish Agency at the time, and asked him to find a solution. And Sharansky brought all of us together. And for 3 years, we negotiated an agreement with the government of Israel. I had a parking spot at the Prime Minister's office. For 3 years, we negotiated a 48-page agreement for the first time in Israel's history, how we can share, how there can be more than one way to be Jewish in the state of Israel. I know it sounds trivial because even your youngest members in shul know that there's more than one way to be Jewish. But in Israel, this is revolutionary. That agreement actually talks about 2 plazas right next to each other. One plaza run by the ultra-Orthodox, the other run by the Reform, Conservative, and Women of the Wall. One is completely run by ultra-Orthodox doctrine, and the other egalitarian, open, sunny, no partition, and quite lovely. There are 12 million visitors a year at the wall. We were hoping that most people will come our way, and we are right, because most people, even some Orthodox, would rather have an egalitarian plaza. This worried the rabbis very much. They applied pressure on Netanyahu, and he reneged after this became a government decision. In 2017, this was passed as a government decision, 15 ministers for, 5 against. In 2018, he reneged on this and decided not to carry out the agreement. And there were no consequences for that.
So we have a question from Michael of what can we do here to help? And
Great question.
I'm also going to pile onto that question that you're here with your Women of the Wall hat on, but you also wear an Israel Religious Action Center, and there's a lot of intertwinedness of those two things. But I'd love to hear how we can be involved in both of those.
Can I just go for 1 minute and look at I want to show you the book that was written by the Rabbi of the Wall. It was just published and it's very close to me. It just would take me a minute.
I'm getting nostalgic looking at the Israeli air conditioners.
It's just so big, you need to see it. Do you see how big, this is how thick it is?
Yeah, it looks like my tikkun.
Okay, so this book, right, weighs 2.5 kilos, that's 5 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the halacha of the Kotel. It was written by a guy, Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich, who receives $1.5 million shekel from the government of Israel. He was appointed in 1990 to run the wall. He's an ultra-Orthodox Jew. In the book, over 583 pages, exactly 583 pages, there are hundreds of photographs. He managed to take hundreds of photos of the wall without getting one woman in the frame. Now, that takes some doing. And there are 2 comments about women here. One is that a woman menstruating should not touch the wall, and the other, that women should not gaze at the Torah scroll when it is raised in the men's section. See, we have cooties at the gaze. I think this man should not be running the wall. I think that if we're talking about the holiest site of the Jewish people, if these are his beliefs, then he is unfit to run the wall where, as I said, 12 million Jews come from all over the world every year. Well, they used to. He's not fit to do that. What do I think you should do? I think the amount of violence against women of the wall is very disturbing. And there is a chance, it is not an imaginary chance, that one of us will be injured, killed or maimed at the wall. And I want you to think right now, what would you do if this happens? We've been at it 32 years. We started as single women, we're now grandmas. And we are there every month attempting to pray out loud, read Torah, put on talitot, and bring girls to read their bat mitzvah portion, and while there's a whole industry of bar mitzvah on the other side of the partition. What would you do if something happened to one of the women of the wall? I think I have a suggestion. Is there an Israeli consulate in Philadelphia? If there is, take a bus, get on it, men, women, children, girls, doesn't matter. Take your Torah scrolls and make a nuisance of yourself in front of the Israeli consulate. And when the consul general comes down and beseeches you, please, the goyim are watching, don't make us, it's a shame what you're doing. Let's come upstairs. The rabbi will come upstairs and I'll talk to the rabbi. The answer is no. We are stopping traffic. You're going to have to kick us out of here. Israel cannot be standing by while women are fighting for the right to have the basic rights at the wall. I'd like you to support the Women of the Wall by reading our newsletter, supporting us financially, because we are heavy users of legal advice. We are constantly, you can't be a law student in Israel and not study Hoffman versus the State of Israel. It's been 18 years in the Supreme Court. It's one of the landmark decisions of the court. And the court always recognized that we have a right, but the court was not courageous to force the government to make a decision. It always was willing to have the government come up with a commission to look into it. Do you know how many years I sat on commission? Years and years on commission. And you know what the commission offered us? You gotta crack a smile at this. Governments commissions have offered the Women of the Wall another wall. Why go to this one? There are other walls in Jerusalem. They offered us 3 other walls. We have, yes, other walls. Look, right here in my living room, I have a wall where, why can't women enjoy praying in my living room? Why is that? Why do they have to go to the Western Wall? So
Right.
there are many ways in which, and just drop us a line. Nechama here, Nechama, if you could say what it means when someone just drops us a line after Rosh Chodesh and says to us, "Well done, ladies. I was proud of you." Nechama, where are you? Are you there, right?
I'm here. We're
Okay,
inspired, we're emboldened. We can't do this by ourselves. We need to know that other people with the same attitudes and the same beliefs and the same pride of being Jewish and having an Israeli, having our homeland here in Israel, we get emboldened by support and by partnership.
I'm asking myself, if there are 2 million Reform Jews in North America and 1 million conservative Jews in North America, 3 million affiliated liberal Jews in North America, how come I can't get 100,000 of them to write Netanyahu, "This is me with my talit, holding my Torah, let my Torah go. I demand Women of the Wall have the right to read Torah at the wall." I don't understand why I can't do it. Maybe I need one Jewish community in Pennsylvania to take this on.
Yes. Well, and I know that in like the 2009, 10, 11, we were doing this. I was at Judea Reform in Durham, North Carolina, and we did to fill in, wrap in. We had a couple of us who wore tzitzit for a month to like raise awareness. We also wrote letters to the consulate. And I also want to point out, if you want to support Women of the Wall financially, do you still sell the talitot? Because that's one great way of supporting the Women of the Wall, and I believe they have several different designs now. So so that's one way to support. We do have another question from Alan. What do you think those antiquated concepts are based upon? Opponents are not stupid; they have different values or a different lens. So where do you? I guess Alan is asking, where do you think they're coming from?
Right. In other words, I think that, for example, I don't know much about it, but the idea on the Torah and women handling it, there was sort of in the liturgy, sort of nobody could handle it with dirty hands. And so the idea was that was the time of month when they were dirty. So that was sort of the liturgy of it. So the question becomes for that I think is interesting is, how do you know, I mean, first, congratulations on what you've done, because you've sort of, I would say mark to market, what's going on there with the values that we share. That said, what I'm not really sure of, and this is just my ignorance, in Israel, where to me, law and religion and government are all a little bit bollocksed up, number one. And number two, just like any society, they keep changing depending on what the values of the day have become. We didn't have, conservative religion in 1925. So in America, things change over time. And so the question is, I guess, how do you change things in Israel? And I guess what you're helping us to understand is that it requires all of us.
Well, I don't think it's just religious people that are holding on to positions of power and paraphernalia that represents power. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was asked how many women you think should be in the Supreme Court, and she said 9. And people were shocked. And she said, there are 9 men right now, and you don't care. So what do you? 9. I understand why rabbis are threatened by the notion that women will be handling the Torah, and next they may be wanting to become rabbis and decide decisions, and their decisions may change religion as we know it, and that is very threatening. Modernity is a big threat on ultra-Orthodoxy, and in Hebrew, the ultra-Orthodox are called Charedim. Charedim means those who are anxious and afraid. Supposedly, they're afraid of God, but I think they're afraid of any change. And changes in gender roles makes them very, very scared. And in fact, pushing women back is something that makes them powerful. Let's look at, for example, at the issue of buses. There were, until recently, 2,500 rides every day of buses in Israel where women were assigned to the back of the bus. They were to board from the back door and to sit in the back of the bus. In my other hat, in the Israel Religious Action Center, I represented 26 Orthodox women who refused to sit in the back of the bus. The case was called Reagan versus the State of Israel. Naomi Reagan is an Orthodox novelist. She was our #1 person. And why push women to the back of the bus? Why do that? How come in this day and age do that? And it was so clear when there was a public commission looking into it for a year and a half that rabbis want control. And that to have control over women, policing women's bodies, policing women's behavior is an excellent way for a rabbi to be admired as very pious. For example, one of the issues is, in all my living days, I've never seen an ad in Israel, rabbi wanted. Have you seen one in your papers? Have you ever seen an ad, a rabbi wanted, that a congregation is looking for a rabbi and you can actually submit your CV? I've never seen one, and I read 4 papers a day, including the ultra-Orthodox papers, and I've never seen such an ad. What does it mean when Israel employs 4,000 rabbis who are state employed? How come? There's city rabbis, neighborhood rabbis, kibbutz rabbis, chief rabbis. There are thousands of rabbis, and I've never seen an ad. It means corruption, sir. It means corruption. When you don't see competition, it means corruption. It means people is selected to a job. For example, Rabbi Shmuel Rabinovich of the Wall was selected for the job. He didn't compete with other people. He was picked by, sadly, the labor movement at the time. And so how does a rabbi stand out if there's no competition? Hear how he stands out. My rabbi is so pious, he doesn't talk to women, even on the phone. My rabbi is even more pious. He keeps the cleanliness of the eyes. He doesn't look at a woman who's not his sister, his daughter, or his mother. My rabbi is in a bunker 60 feet under earth, and he's never going to see a woman again. He is the most pious rabbi in Israel. You understand that piety is measured by distancing from women. So we have work cut out for us, and I want to give you a real ray of hope. The director of Women of the Wall is an Orthodox woman. The Orthodox women who we represented in the buses case, by the way, this nonsense is ended. It is illegal to push a woman to the back of the bus. We won that. Every Israeli bus has signs now that say that it's a crime to interfere with a woman's seating arrangement. Orthodox women are marching and changing orthodoxy. The bravest feminists I know are Orthodox women that I admire more than, and one of them is our director at Women of the Wall, and there's a good amount of Orthodox women in Women of the Wall. We are multi-denominational. The rabbis have a good reason to worry because Orthodox women are changing orthodoxy, and good for them.
We have another question from Joel. Why do you think all women, do you mean not just Orthodox, Joel? Yeah, not just Orthodox march and protest and withhold cooperation until sanity rules. Joel, do you want to ask that question out loud? I'm not sure that I understand it.
Civil disobedience is probably the strongest weapon that you have. I mean, you're asking us,
Right.
you're asking us here in North America to march on the consulates, Israeli consulates. But what if, big if, what if all Israeli women just stopped cooperating?
You're
Are we
right.
imagining
You're right.
It's like John Lennon's question.
Yes.
What if they gave a war and nobody came?
Interesting.
Yeah. Yes.
What you're talking about for us here is outrageous. I mean, just suppose our Pennsylvania Senator Pat Toomey got up in Congress and submitted a bill that from now on, all women will sit in the back of the bus and get up and give men seats and, everything that you're enduring in Israel. Suppose our Senator Pat Toomey would propose that. I use him because he's a person that I've written to 1,000 times.
He's more likely to do it.
and never get an answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I get an answer, but it's one of those things that we refer to as a pivot.
Right. I asked him about the judicial confirmation hearings, like, why were you doing this now when you wouldn't do it for Merrick Garland? And basically his response was, well, we have the numbers now.
Right. That's it. I mean, it's a pre-prepared answer that, somebody wrote for him.
Anyway.
So I would think that the kinds of things that you're talking about are things that were perhaps the norm in the South of the United States toward Blacks at the turn of the 20th century. And, slowly but surely over the 20th century, those things changed by the accelerating frequency of protests. And then, you probably know all of that history. Not that it's different now, but it's more subtle.
I was just about to say that.
So that's my question. My question is, why are Israeli women putting up with this?
I want to first agree with you completely that civil disobedience is the most effective tool. And I want to, mea culpa, to say that going to the Supreme Court was a mistake. I think it was our biggest single mistake. Even though, every lawyer in Israel knows the story of Women of the Wall and how it went to court and how hundreds of thousands of pages were submitted to the court and the court has written, in the end, being arrested was the most effective thing that ever happened to us, and we should have done it way earlier, and I agree with you, that's the most effective thing. Why don't Israeli women march, millions of them, and protest this? As I told you, Women of the Wall is way ahead of its time. It is a diaspora that was brought to us from the United States. It is the final frontier. Equality in religion is the final frontier. And Leah here is one of the people marching towards that final frontier. Those Orthodox women that I told you I admire so much, if it weren't for rabbis like Leah, they wouldn't know where they're marching to. It's the Reform and Conservative movement that give them a beacon of some model of where they're going to go. So women in Israel, women are very far from marching over this issue, because I think it is seen as a luxury. It's going to pray at the wall. The wall belongs to the ultra-Orthodox. What if you're a feminist? What are you doing at the wall? And if you are religious, then you buy to this patriarchal religion and you should suffer. It is a unique woman that becomes a woman of the wall. However, women of the wall and men of the wall is what I see in front of me now. That's the choir you were talking about before. You get it. In fact, you get something that Israelis don't, and that is because Israelis can't even imagine what it is to live in a country that has a constitution. You know, we don't have one. You should use yours more often. You've got a wonderful document at your disposal, and the ease in which you understand civil rights, human rights, minority rights is something that is not very common in Israel. We don't have the history of your democracy. As I said, you need to work these muscles now more than ever. And about your extremism, talking to your senator about different issues, I must tell you that I'm very worried about your vice president, Mr. Pence, and Mr. Pompeo, who are both evangelists. At the opening of the American embassy here in Jerusalem, the major speaker for the American government was Pastor Hagee, who actually said in a few occasions that the reason he supports the Jews in Israel is because we need to go through 7 years of turmoil, and then we will all convert to Christianity, and there'll be a combustion of some kind, and Jesus Christ will return to the planet. And this is why we're supposed to support Israel. You Jews are superior, Hagee said at the opening of the embassy. You are superior. You will bring back, you need to go through this. This is all in Revelations. This is what the prophecy says. Mr. Pence believes it too.
The reason why the fundamentalist Christians are such fervent supporters of Israel has been, clearly stated by many of them, or the ones that get caught unawares, and that is they have to secure the place where Jesus can touch down when he returns.
Yeah, touch down.
Yes. So I see Judy's been waiting to ask a question for a while.
Oh, okay.
So bring her in. Judy?
Go ahead, Judy.
No, I don't have a specific question.
Oh, okay.
You mean they actually said that at the opening of the...
No, Hagee just said that we are superior, Jews are superior, and that we are part of the prophecy. The rest of the stuff he said in many occasions, just look up Hagee, you'll see he says it all the time, that he supports Israel because everything that's happened to the Jewish people is according to the Revelations. Even Hitler is a way to bring. Look it up. Just put up Hagee Hitler in Google and it will come up. Wow. I'm very worried about this guy. I was in a place in Pennsylvania where the Mennonites and the Amish live. I wanted to have a good look at ultra-Orthodox Christians. And when they heard I'm from Israel, the Amish love Israel and how wonderful it is. And one of them asked me, what about Christians in Israel? I said, do you know that the Christians in Israel are Arab? If I've ever seen a person's skull explode, that was it. He hates Arabs. He didn't realize that the Christian minority in Israel speaks Arabic, that in Nazareth, everything in the church is in Arabic, that the Christians are Arabs. It was just a cognitive dissonance that made his head fall off. Yes, the
And
nuance of Israel is foreign to them. I want to say something about friends. You are friends of Israel, because when Joel's heart breaks because of behaviors that are immoral and don't stand up to the standard of Jewish values, that's a friend. When evangelists are willing to excuse everything Israel does because of the great Armageddon that's coming in and it's going to bring Jesus back, that's no friend. Your rabbi did a brave thing. She invited me to speak to you on Simchat Torah. This is many years of marriage speaking. I believe that love is what remains after we know the truth. And I think she's enabled you to hear an ugly truth about Israel. Israel has given up on the notion that there's more than one way to be Jewish. In Israel, there's just one way to keep kashrut, one way to convert, one way to get married, way to get buried, one way to get divorced, one way to be called a rabbi, and that way is Orthodox, and that has gone corrupt. We have corruption. Maybe I should remind you that our chief rabbi sat in jail, was recently released for bribery. Our current chief rabbis, Rabbi Lau and Rabbi Yosef, are the sons of the previous chief rabbis. That reeks of corruption. There are not only two families in Israel that can make a chief rabbi. Even the sons of Moses, whom we lamented today, they did not become our leaders. Joshua became a leader because of excellence, because of merit. So Israel is a phenomenal miracle. I really believe this with all my heart. Read our literature, our music, agriculture, and technology. We astound the world. In 73 years, we've done more than anybody else who's 73 years on the planet. However, Jewishly, we have been negligent of the notion of pluralism and tolerance. And you guys are sitting on the big mother lode of tolerance and equality and pluralism because it's so natural to you. And that's why I turn to you and I say, you are my brothers, you are my sisters. Without you, really, we couldn't go on.
That's, I'm just, my head is exploding right now because I'm processing a lot of the things you say. I just want to see, before we continue with our service, if there are any more questions for Anat.
Oh my God.
Shelley is giving her appreciation.
Oh, thank you, Shelly. Toda.
And
Thank you all.
And I encourage people to keep up on it's hard because our own news cycle is just completely bananas right now. But the reason everybody was talking about like the moments they get radicalized or whatever. And for me, it was a woman in Israel, and this would have totally been buried in right now's news cycle. A woman in Israel was beaten up for having tefillin marks on her arm. And that was sort of what got me on the train. And I think making sure, and I think obviously by joining WOW's newsletter, we probably get more of that information. It's kind of hard to keep ourselves aware of that right now when we're trying to protect our own reproductive rights. So not to say that things like this are not happening in the United States, or that religion is not taking control of politics in the United States, but to keep updated so that we know when are those moments we need to be taking to the streets, when we know when those moments are that we need to be writing letters to the consulate. I think that's one of the great things that we can do. And I just saw that not only do you have, because I went to get the link, not only do you have several designs of the talit now, but there's also a mezuzah, which I just think is a wonderful way to show your support for Israeli Jewry and like the multitude of Israeli Jewry in Israel. So thank you. We have lots of thank you coming in.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yes, it's a pleasure to see you. Oh, I'm sorry. I have one more question, and I know that we're running a little bit behind. So I thank you everybody for your patience. Are you gathering now with the pandemic? Is Women of the Wall gathering in virtually, or are they gathering in person still?
The wall is now allowing only 2,500 people. They close the wall once you arrive to 2,500. We've tried to get a capsule at the wall that 20 women of the wall will be able to get together. We were not able to get such a capsule. We were pushed to the parking lot. We prayed in the parking lot. We decided to move to Zoom. In the exhaust pipes, it just didn't seem respectful. In Zoom, we have many, many supporters. We celebrate together. Look, the virus has gotten women of the wall to leave the wall for a short period, as you know, but hopefully we'll be back. I want to thank every one of you, really, toda rabah, and leave you with one thought. Israel is way too important to be left to the Israelis. We need you, Joel. We need you, Judy. We need you, Alan. We need you, Shelley. We need all of you on board. It's way too important just to leave to Israelis.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.